we have the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development on Zoom with us this morning. He's also the Member of Parliament for Brea. Minister, the first time in, second time in life I'm seeing you. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning to my host. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
And the people of Brea, don't forget to give them a special shout out.
And the people of Brea, all the way, and the Southwest Peninsula.
How are you doing, Minister? How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
And
just one correction, Natalie. I am Minister of Labour, Small and Medium Enterprises, who has moved to the Ministry of Youth and Youth Affairs.
Okay. Sorry, I was not aware of that. Right. So it's just Minister of Labour. So yes. Talk to us about how the people in Brea are doing, in the pandemic, because Brea has always been considered one of those constituencies that always seem to need jobs. They're always asking for jobs. So in the absence of those jobs and with now an exacerbated situation with COVID-19, how are they surviving in Brea?
It's very difficult. And you're right, Brea has always been one of those areas that always looking for jobs and livelihoods. And with this pandemic, it has actually devastated many parts of our communities. And we have, going back, a number of issues with the restructuring of Petrotrin. Some people would have been displaced. Yeah. We have works in general have stopped. People are really struggling at this time. But you know what? We have faith and hope that by the time we get out of this pandemic, that things will start to look upbeat. We do have some initiatives taking place within the community that are likely to affect jobs and livelihoods, but that, as everything else, may take some time, a year or two, before it actually comes to fruition.
So what happens to the people for the next 2 years? If you have families there now who are destitute or who may really need some kind of assistance, how are you providing that assistance for them as their MP?
Well, one of the things we're doing is particularly trying to empower people to take their passion and turn it into an enterprise. And we had a very good example of that in that a group of about 17 young ladies did just that. And they started to do the equivalent of a farmer's market. And the story goes that one had a little parlor. And one friend said, I need to bake some bread and sell because that's my skill. She said, why don't you bake the bread and I will sell it for you in the parlor? And that went on to the nuts person, and that went on to the nail technician, and that went on. So I'm saying to people that the time for waiting for monitoring from heaven and somebody to give you something is not nigh. You need to use your God-given skills. We will assist you in creating some of those outlets, like what I just explained, and move people forward. And that goes to agriculture, that goes to small business, and therefore that is what I'm trying to empower people within my community to do at this time.
Are they being offered any kind of relief grants? Do you know how many people in your community, in your constituency, are seeking government assistance at this time? Because I'm figuring the number might be more than some other constituencies.
Yes, we have quite a large intake coming into the office and signing up for not only government relief grants, but social services grants, roof repairs, house repairs, food cards. We have the ongoing food distribution taking place right now, and that is heavily oversubscribed. We have a lot more people, and therefore, fortunately or unfortunately, we have to go through a really stringent means test to determine how do we distribute so that we get those hampers and so on to the most needy. We are also not blessed with a whole lot of industries and so on at this time. So it's challenging, it's difficult, but people understand that you have to be alive after this in order to have livelihood. So we ask them to be patient.
Right. I definitely agree with you. I think it's one of the things the Prime Minister is always saying that, for you to complain about this is that first you have to be alive. But talk to us about the Ministry of Labor and the role that it plays in this pandemic, because so often on the show we get questions from people, about what is supposed to be happening in the workplaces, who's considered essential, because a service itself might be considered essential, but they're not sure if their portfolio is essential. So just a brief overview of how the Ministry of Labor, plays into this pandemic and how it helps.
Well, the Ministry of Labor, to start with, we create some of the policy guidelines that guide workers, employers, and so on. And we have been doing that since last April, March, where we actually created some policy guidelines on the closure of schools. We did a national policy on the guidelines for preparing the workplace for COVID-19. We looked at guidelines to employers and businesses. We created some documents around working from home, returning to work. And recently, as late as August 2020, we put out a policy guideline on remote work in Trinidad and Tobago, which was done by the Industrial Relation Advisory Committee headed by Dr. Guy. And it's on our website for anyone to peruse. We have also interacted with OSH, who reports into the Ministry of Labor, with regards to inspections and so on of workplaces to ensure that the right sanitizers and the place is made up appropriate for workers to get into. So by and large, we have been guiding some of the issues via guidelines. Now, there is no approved guideline by the government of Trinidad and Tobago with regards to COVID-19 and all that we just spoke about. But what we have done is created some guidelines based on best practice coming out of regional and the international labor organizations and a number of other organizations. And we have crafted what we think is appropriate for Trinidad and Tobago. And that's available on our website.
Right. One of those changes or guidelines for employers that was instituted last year is that parents are encouraged to use their support systems in the first instance to take care of their children to allow them to report for duty. Now, I want to know, what do you say to those people who are in the working environment, or especially single mothers, because the reality is that the schools are closed, the daycare centers are closed, the private facilities are closed, and a lot of them have to report for work. So is there an constant update of the guidelines to suit the situation that we're in?
Well, the issue of parents and school and children and so on is that not everyone can work from home. Some jobs must take place at the employer's premises. And by and large, what we are encouraging employers in particular to do is to, as far as possible, identify those persons, those women who can benefit from work at home, and to allow them to do so, because we recognize that women are generally much more open to work from home because of those situations you just spoke about. The children, the household, the miserable husband who still need them to do everything that they were doing before, and therefore it offers them some flexibility. Unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of dialogue is necessary between those particular workers and their employers, because every situation is different. There are different nuances with regards to what can and cannot work. And therefore, we have to also engage the extended family, the grandmoms, the aunts, the men who may not be working.
I understand that, Minister, but in terms of the ministry itself, what does someone do if if a mom finds herself in that position and the employer decides that, okay, your salary will be cut? How does the Ministry of Labor get into that situation? How does the mom lodge a complaint? I think these are the things that people need to understand so that they can know what to do.
Now, to begin with, nobody is supposed to be able to cut anybody's pay unilaterally. That is against the law. Your salary is sacrosanct. Your salary is just like property. Nobody should be able to take your salary and change it unilaterally. That must be a discussion. That discussion has to center around when is my salary being cut, how much is being cut by, when will it be reinstated, and when would my general terms and conditions go back to normal. They can lodge complaints with the Labor Inspectorate in the Ministry of Labor, who is charged with looking at particularly minimum wage, upholding the Minimum Wage Act, with regards to ensuring that people are paid what they are supposed to be paid, that the deductions are made, the statutory deductions are made, and to ensure that workers are not exploited. So if someone has a problem in that regard, one of the first places they can start with is the Labor Inspectorate. And
so the Labor Inspectorate unit, but also if you said that you can't cut the salary unilaterally, but if you have, whether it's that pregnant woman, that single mom, or somebody who thinks that, okay, I can work from home because of this pandemic, and they're being told that your salary might be cut if you don't come into the office, is that something that the Ministry of Labor can intervene in as well?
Yes, well, I go back to the point that you cannot cut salary, you cannot threaten people by cutting their salary and forcing them to work. That is.
What happens if that happens? If that happens and the salary is cut, what's the next step for that employee?
That employee needs to go to contact the Labor Inspectorate, make a complaint, because it's very dynamic, Natalie. You cannot, one plaster does not fit everything.
Your electricity just went?
It appears so.
I'm still seeing you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I still have battery power, so that's fine. Well, it seems to be disappearing, but strangely enough, the air conditioner is working and everything. But we work with that. So clearly, we have issues that we cannot prescribe for in every situation.
Right. I'm seeing one here. It says that where discussions between the recognized majority unions, employees, and employers have failed to resolve their issue, either the employer or recognized majority unions can contact the Conciliation Advisory Board.
Oh, yes, Conciliation Unit. That is the unit in the ministry that takes complaints from either employers or worker representatives, and really act as a conciliation unit where we bring the parties together and try to resolve the issue. So in the first instance, the Labor Inspectorate might find something is wrong, and they may, in fact, and therefore there is a symbiotic relationship between the two. And where people find themselves aggrieved, they can actually go for conciliation and have those discussions before it goes to the industrial court.
But how well are these things working in this time of the pandemic? The inspectorate unit, the conciliatory unit, how well are they working?
They are working well. People are manning those units. and we have been treating with a number of issues on an ongoing basis.
Are we getting a lot of complaints in these units from employees, employers?
Strange enough, we have complaints, but it is not at the level that you would think in such a situation that you would get. So maybe there may be a lot of people who are gun shy at actually doing and making those complaints because of repercussions or perceived repercussions. So I urge the workers to please understand that they do have rights, that they do have a voice, and where they can, to go with their recognized majority unions to deal with those issues.
Does the Ministry of Labor has anywhere on its website where it tells or explains to people, or somewhere where they can call to find out, if they're essential, yes or no?
Well, the essential service, whether you are essential employee, is defined under the legal notices that have been put out. And those notices identify clearly who are essential services. There is a gray area where, for instance, in a ministry, that ministries are considered essential services. But there may be units within a ministry that may not be essential, and that has to be determined by the relevant permanent secretary. And arrangements are made in that regard. In my own ministry, we have people on rotation, and we also have units where people can actually work from work. And if I were to give an example, my, say, legal unit don't need to be in the office. They can work offline, they can do things all. However, the accounting unit, who have to look at salaries and payments and so on, they may not be able to work from home because they need to deal with the physical documents and so on. So it depends, and there is a lot of room for discussion and negotiation. People shouldn't feel disempowered that they are hopeless. Have the conversations.
And you're saying if they call the Ministry of Labor, people, the Labor Inspectorate unit, the conciliatory unit, there are people who are there to answer the phones. Because yes, sometimes those are the issues we hear as well, that you're calling to get assistance and nobody's picking up.
Okay, no, they are there.
Okay, well, I'm definitely happy to hear that. All right, Minister, our first chat. Thank you so much. Until the next one, let's hope you get some electricity.
Yeah. I will. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. The Minister of Labor, they're speaking to us. He's also the MP for Brea, and he's saying things are kind of rough in Brea, but they're trying to empower. They're trying to empower the people there so that they can help themselves.